All right, in addition to developing an identity of self, during adolescence, you're continuing to experience some moral development. There was a researcher named Kohlberg who did some pretty extensive studies looking at moral development during adolescence. And the way he did this basically was presenting hypothetical scenarios that pretty much pit like two different moral issues against each other. So for example, there's a pretty famous dilemma that he came up with that's called the Heinz dilemma. It's like this story about there's a woman who has some sort of terminal medical condition, something like cancer, and her husband, whose name is Heinz, that's why it's called the Heinz dilemma. Her husband finds out that there's been this drug that's developed by a doctor that's been shown to cure this illness with like 100% success rate or something. But the doctor's selling it for this really like outrageous price. He's selling it for like 50 times more than it actually costs to make it, and he can't raise the money for it. He tries asking everyone he knows to like borrow money. He tries to raise it himself. He tries talking to the doctor and asking like if he can get it for a lower price or if he can pay him later. The doctor refuses, and so he goes in the middle of the night, breaks into the clinic and steals the drug so that he can give it to his wife so that she doesn't die. Okay, so it's like this dilemma, like obviously stealing is wrong, but you don't want your wife to die. And so he presents these kinds of dilemmas to adolescents and also kids in other stages, and just kind of looks at the way that they then respond to the dilemma. Usually they're prompted with questions like, you know, was it wrong for him to do this? Should he be punished, etc. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. He emphasizes that the content of the response that they give isn't necessarily important. It's more the method that they use to kind of reason through it. Thank you. And so from these dilemmas and just kind of analyzing the steps that children and adolescents take to try to come up with a response, he categorizes them into these different stages that I'll talk about in just a minute. Moral understanding is promoted by actively grappling with the moral issue, so really thinking through all the different perspectives, and this obviously occurs because of gains in perspective taking, so that ability to see both from the husband's perspective and the doctor's perspective and all the perspectives involved helps contribute to the moral understanding. From these moral dilemmas, Kohlberg identified these 6 different stages of moral development, and sort of also broke them into 3 like broader stages basically. You have the pre-conventional level, or stages 1 and 2. These would be mostly in like early and middle childhood, for most people at least. Stage 1 is characterized by punishment and obedience. So someone who gets that Heinz dilemma is in stage 1 or 2 will often just say right out, Heinz should be punished, he should go to jail because there's a law that you're not supposed to steal, and he stole. So kind of like end of story. They don't really consider all the other perspectives. In stage 2, they are starting to consider multiple perspectives, but they tend to have this view of morality that's based mostly on like your own, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word. I don't know if I have it. Like your own like self-interest, basically, like trying to act selfishly. And so in stage 2, they may concede that, okay, it makes sense that Heinz would steal, but it's for selfish reasons. They may say, oh, it was okay for Heinz to steal because now he gets to spend more time with his wife. So rather than looking at the morality of like saving someone's life, it's more of like a selfish perspective, basically. In stage 3 and 4, this is called the conventional stage, and both stage 3 and 4 are considered like mature stages of moral development. Most adolescents are in stage 3 and 4, but also a lot of adults would be in stages 3 and 4. Stage 3 is where you basically have a view of like good boy, good girl, or bad boy, bad girl. So you tend to maybe categorize people based off of those like individual circumstances, for example. But they do emphasize morality of interpersonal cooperation. So they say that like rules and laws are important because it allows us as a society to cooperate with other people. They have an ideal sense of reciprocity, which means like if you give me something, I should give something back in every circumstance without really like considering context. So like for example in stage 3, they may say that Heinz should steal, the drugs, but he should do so because then his family will have like a decent view of him, or people will be more cooperative with him because he was willing to sacrifice himself to do something for his wife. So it's really emphasizing that like social cooperative component. Stage 4 is called social order maintaining, which basically says that rules and laws are in place in order to maintain social order and structure so that we don't, sort of disseminate into chaos, basically. People in stage 4 might argue, for example, that Hines should go to jail, even though he was thinking of his wife, and that's like, respectable. That if we don't punish him, then other people will look at that as like a flaw in the legal system, and everybody will start stealing. And so we need to punish him just to make sure that like everyone understands the rules. Okay, that may be a way that they reason. Again, it's not the content, it's not the fact that they're saying he should or shouldn't go to jail. It's more like their logic or their reasoning behind why. And then the post-conventional or principled level are stages 5 and 6. These are like a higher level of morality. The idea is that not necessarily everyone actually gets to this stage of moral understanding, or you may get to this stage for certain things but not for other things, but it's sort of a higher level. And these are basically where morals are based on a social contract or some sort of universal ethical principle. Basically the idea that we should only have laws in place because they help promote a better society, they help improve people's lives, and if a law or rule isn't improving someone's lives, then that rule should be changed or abandoned. And if rules are constructed that way, then people are more likely to follow them because they can see and understand like the reason for it, and be willing to follow those kinds of rules. And so in this case they would probably say that the rule that, the law of not being able to steal was not created with the intention to try to stop people from curing a disease. And so if these laws are like interfering with each other, then maybe we should actually change our legal system to adapt to specific situations like that. So it's just a more sort of like higher level moral understanding. According to Kohlberg, moral development is slow and gradual. Most people move through these first 4 stages in order. So when you're a young kid, you go from stage 1 to 2, and then in adolescence, you might enter 3 and then 4. 5 and 6 are a little more blurry as far as like the ordering of them. Like I said, few people actually reach this post-conventional or principled level of moral understanding. A lot of people just kind of stop here. And so because of that, stage 3 and 4 are actually considered like mature moral understanding. And in real life, people often reason below their actual capacity. So you may have the capacity to reason at stage 5 and 6, but in a regular like day-to-day basis, you may only resort to like stage 3, for example. Using stages 5 and 6 requires kind of like extensive thought, which requires time. And so just on a day-to-day basis, when you're making like small moral decisions that probably don't have that large of an impact, you probably resort to those kind of easier stages and don't really consider all the perspectives or don't apply like some universal ethical principle.